Where do we look?
You just look at me. You just look over at me. You're just talking. You're just talking. You're not gonna. The camera is doing nothing other than sitting there.
Yeah, right. That's not what I heard.
That's all it's doing. So who are you? What is your name?
My name is Siri.
You can look at me.
Anderson Welch.
Siri June Anderson Welch? Okay. Why Anderson?
Because that was my birth name.
There we go. All right. What year were you born?
1942.
1942? Okay. And where were you born?
Waltham, Massachusetts.
Okay.
I was a preemie,
You're a preemie? Okay.
so I had to stay in the hospital for 7 weeks, I think, or maybe 3 weeks, until I would wake up enough to eat.
How many siblings do you have?
6 of us altogether.
Six total? Okay.
Yeah. 3 sisters, 2 brothers.
Okay. Are you the middle, oldest, youngest?
Next to the oldest.
Next to the oldest?
I have an older sister, then I have a younger sister after me, then a brother, then a sister and a brother.
Okay. And you were telling me the other day a little bit about the history of your family coming and where they settled, and then getting into nursing and and then education. So can you recap that for me?
Well, my family, my dad's father came from Sweden when he was 16 years old, came to New York, and then had a relative, so he settled in Waterford, Connecticut. No, wrong, Watertown, Connecticut. And stop this. Erase it. I just said the wrong thing.
Backwards? He can edit it.
I'll edit it all out.
Okay.
It's all edited. You can't
My-
make any mistakes. You're okay.
My grandfather went from New York to Watertown, Massachusetts, where there was a relative of his, and he worked for at least 30 years with Goodyear Tire as a carpenter.
Okay. And then?
And my grandmother grew up right at Plymouth Rock, Massachusetts, and was raised there, and they lived in Watertown once they were married.
You said they could actually sled down the hill onto the rock.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the other interesting thing was, there were stores down around there with the settlement and so forth. And they had barrels of pickles. And my grandmother, one time, somehow slipped into the barrel of pickles.
She got into the barrel?
Yeah,
Okay.
she meant to get just a pickle.
Right.
But she was pickled.
Now, there's a lot of brine in those barrels. So she was able to stand up in it and get out? Or?
Oh, I have no idea
Don't know.
of the details.
Okay.
It just heard that humor of her landing in the pickle barrel.
The camera's not going to do anything. It's not going anywhere. You don't have to worry about it. Just look over here. It's not doing anything. It's just sitting there. Will it help if I bring the camera over this way?
Not
And
at
away
all.
from you?
Oh, no.
If I bring it back here?
No, can you see it?
Huh? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can make adjustments. Bloop. There we go. Is that better?
I'll see.
I don't like it.
She talked and she's not.
What are you doing?
She didn't like it. It's not doing it. It's just sitting there. That's it. Okay, so Watertown, Connecticut,
Yes.
Massachusetts, and there, and then you were born 1942
In Waltham, Massachusetts.
in Waltham. Okay, and one of 6 children, and
We grew up in Waltham until I was 8th grade. I just started the 8th grade, and then we moved to Maine
okay.
for a few years.
And so, where did you graduate school from?
Waterford, Connecticut.
Okay.
And Dad moved around.
Okay. And what did you do then after graduation?
I went to nurse's training. I had three things. I wanted to be a teacher, I wanted to be a home ec teacher, or nurse, or an artist. But I figured the art could come along with different classes, development. And so my mother also wanted to be a nurse. And so my sister was an LPN, and so I pursued the nursing.
And you got your RN then in what year?
1963.
1963. Okay. What year did you meet Bob?
Close to 1961, too. Bob Garris was working at the hospital where I was, and he worked as an x-ray technician, and then he worked part-time as an orderly, and he invited Carol and myself at the hospital Christmas party to come and go to hear the Messiah.
Handel's Messiah?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But there was no mistaking. Bob Garris had a girlfriend, and he was earning money while there to go back to Virginia, wherever he was from, to get married.
Mm-hmm.
So everything was clear. And in January, Carol and I did, actually Carol was with Bob Welch, and I was with Bob Garris, kinda. Mm-hmm. And then Bob Garris asked me in January, he said, so do you have any boyfriends? When we met in the hospital, working on the same floor, in the kitchen, no less. And I said, what are you interested for? You already got a gal or so forth. And he said, Bob Welch is interested. So that's how the beginning of
the beginning of 54 years.
Yeah, plus.
Yeah. 54 years of marriage today.
Right. And so Bob and I dated from, I think, September through December, and then he went to Arizona Bible College, and he just disappeared. And then Carol and I were active in the college career group, and there had been a spring party, I can't remember exactly what it was, and we went with two students from Tufts Dental thing, and we were also on the entertainment committee or whatever, and we had some jokes, and we asked Roger, who was a medical student, if Judy would, if he kissed Judy, would Judy kiss him back? And then we said no. He wanted to kiss him his back. He would want her to kiss him
On the lips, yeah.
So then 2 days later, I got a letter in the mail, and I thought for sure someone was getting back at me because it was labeled Bob Welch, from Bob Welch, but that was the beginning of our relationship continuing.
Mm-hmm. So you were telling me the other day, you were talking about your spiritual roots too, and how that was an influence from all the way from your grandparents, even though it wasn't in the Baptist faith, it was in. So tell us a little bit about that.
My mom and dad met at the Nazarene College in Quincy, Massachusetts. My mother, during that time of college years, did something about having a revival or special meetings in Vermont, and her sister, her sister's fiance, and her also her brother all got saved as a result of Mom's having been at college.
Okay.
And
That influence then carried over to you, and
right.
yeah.
And I think my older sister and I both married pastors, but I think it's the upbringing and because the other younger ones are not so inclined to spiritual things.
But you said even though they're not inclined to spiritual things, there's definitely a family tie. When Dad was real sick, they came and took care and did whatever was needed so that you could be with him.
Oh, Sally, specifically, 7 years younger than I am, and she was single at the time. She came to Mountain High near Denver and stayed with me and took care of the kids while I went to see him in the hospital in Denver.
Don't go away.
She'll feel more comfortable with you there.
Hello? Oh, yeah, right. I don't think so.
Maybe not so comfortable with you
Better
there.
than they were.
So that brought your spiritual upbringing. You and Dad's, and now what year was it then that he wrote you the letter from Arizona and you got that? What year was that? Do you know?
To do 63. Four?
Wasn't it? 64 in the spring?
You came
And
up
I
to see
came
me.
down to see, and he wanted to get married, and I said, I think we better see each other before this time difference and so.
She exaggerates.
So that was in
Anyway.
the spring of '64, but you
And
did
I
get
went down-
married. You
and
did
I
get
went
married.
down in June to see him
Okay.
in Arizona, because he was at the Bible college.
And that was Bible College in Phoenix?
Phoenix, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And so then I agreed.
You did what?
I said I
Agreed.
would be your wife.
So and then you all were married December 26th,
Uh-huh.
1964.
Right.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. And you were married. Where were you married? Were you
St.
married?
Petersburg, Florida.
My family was having
Yeah, I know it.
a family reunion. My parents had moved to Florida.
St. Petersburg.
Okay.
when I was in nurses training,
Okay.
and so
So they have a reunion, so we decided,
Decided-
actually she decided, we decided,
why not
That-
take advantage of everybody being together and just,
yeah, and just do it. So we
So-
did on the 26th.
it was a Saturday.
Right.
And so from St. Petersburg, then did you all go back to Arizona?
Went back to
Phoenix.
Arizona,
Okay.
and then from there we went to Colorado and Alaska.
Okay. So while in Arizona, were you still working nursing? Did you
Yes.
get a job then in
Yeah,
Phoenix?
yeah, I could get a job almost anywhere I went in because nurses were.
She just walk in and they say, "Oh, you're a nurse? You're an RN? Hey, how about starting yesterday?"
Okay. Okay.
But they don't do that anymore.
Right.
So
They should, but they don't.
Okay. So Arizona to Colorado,
Uh-huh.
then to Alaska.
Went to
Um,
Alaska in '66.
So
Right.
Mary Beth was born in '67, so
Correct.
right,
66.
Robin was 10 months old. Yeah.
Okay. So you have 3 daughters,
Correct.
Right.
right?
We have 3 daughters. They are Robin, Mary Beth, and Michelle. And Robin is our eldest, not our oldest, but our eldest. Everybody was in Alaska for a while.
Right. So, talking to your grandchildren and talking about things that you have seen in your lifetime that have changed in our world, what would you say, Mom, is the biggest change that you have seen? Not so much spiritually, because we'll get to the spiritual aspect, but in the physical. What are some things of your childhood that are different than now? How's that?
have a husband.
Well, we used to walk everywhere.
Yeah,
As kids, we walked everywhere.
Right.
We didn't take a car anywhere. And if we wanted to talk to somebody, we went to see them. We had no phones.
Okay.
We did not have a phone until I was almost 30.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I did not grow up with telephones.
Yeah. So communication was much different.
Correct.
If correspondence was all
Travel,
done by letter.
Correspondence was by letter, sending packages and so forth. And now you just send little cards with money cards.
Yeah. So even the correspondence, sending a letter. Let's say that you were wanting to send a package or a letter to your parents from Arizona to Florida.
Or to
How long would
Massachusetts.
that take?
Probably 4 or 5 days.
For mail to get there? It was that quick then?
I think so.
Alaska was a
Within the
different
states,
story.
within the lower 48, it was quicker than from Alaska out.
Sure.
Or from the lower 48 to Alaska.
Okay.
One time, when the kids, Grandma sent them from Florida a package. It went from Florida to San Francisco, to Honolulu, back to Seattle, and then to Anchorage. And it took it 6 weeks or 2 months.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
I also, when we were in Alaska and had Mary Beth and Robin,
Mm-hmm.
we ordered from Spiegel on October 1st clothes and Christmas stuff because we were going to leave on early in January to go to what we call the lower 48.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted the clothes to have for them as well when we traveled. And it did, the
it didn't
package,
get to us until March.
Wow. Wow.
and that was Spiegel.
Yeah.
So communication, travel was obviously much different then. We've talked about driving the Alcan back in the '60s, and it was still
It was all gravel.
It was still and the corduroy roads in some places, the log and mixed with
Right,
gravel. So
right. It was a rough highway.
yeah,
It was
So-
not.
travel obviously something different. Communication something different.
So we drove, by the way, in the wintertime often. And the reason why
Because it
was
was
because
smoother.
it was snow-packed and ice-packed, and then when they graded it or plowed it, they plowed it with a grader, and which made grooves down the road, so you stayed in the road
Right.
instead of going off the road, sliding off the road.
And everyone always stopped when somebody else was
Yeah. People
delayed.
stopped. We stopped for people. People
If
stopped
They
for
were
us.
putting in contact lenses or whatever.
Right.
That was a courtesy that
Just to
people
check
did.
on people.
Right.
Yeah. So what else would you say has changed since your childhood? We were talking
Medicine.
medicine.
because of just all the knowledge,
Sure.
computers and so forth. That
And then we were talking the other day about even just getting ice boxes versus
Uh-huh, right.
refrigerators.
We had ice boxes.
Right.
You know what an ice box is? It's a box, insulated. With one section of it, you put a 25-pound chunk of ice in that the Iceman came and brought to you, and then the rest of it just cooled. It didn't make it cold, but it cooled the rest of it.
Kept it from going bad.
Right. Well,
Most do.
most of the time, but things weren't in the refrigerator that long, or in the.
Well, that would have been another difference. Is most of your food was probably fresher.
Fresh. Uh-huh.
It was
right.
fresh. It wasn't frozen. So all your meals were prepared from food, not from a package out of the freezer.
Correct. We didn't have any packaging.
Right.
By the way, back then, a box of cereal, a big box of cereal, cost 25 cents.
Let's talk about that. What did gas cost per gallon?
The least we paid for after we got married was 18 cents a gallon.
18 cents a gallon.
Yeah.
And what kind of car?
Web City. Yeah.
What kind of car did you have when you all were married? When you got married?
We had
Station wagon.
a red Ford station wagon.
Okay.
Uh,
Was it Ranchero?
I'm not sure what it was called at that point in time.
Club wagon, probably.
It was just a Ford wagon,
Okay,
red.
okay.
Then we bought in 60. All right, we bought 67 and 66 Mercury Monterey. And by the way, we paid for a Mercury Monterey, which was a top of the line car. We paid $2,700 for it.
Yeah.
Now, try and buy one today.
Was that a Monterey or the Marquis?
No, that's the Monterey.
Monterey. Okay,
Right.
I'm not familiar with it.
Right.
I know
They
the
don't make them
Marquis.
anymore.
Yeah, I know the Marquis, but I didn't know the
Right.
Montereys. Okay.
Right. So it was a big car.
So tell me about your childhood.
My childhood was really nothing much. I would say we just grew up.
Well,
But-
let's back up. You were born what year?
I was born in 1937, February 22nd, 1937.
And where?
Which was, by the way, it was just a couple years ago.
Right.
Uh,
Where at?
In Sharon, Massachusetts, in our apartment we had on the dining room table, because we had a blizzard, and the doctor came to pick my mother up to take her to the hospital. He couldn't get out either way, backing up or going forward. He got stuck in snowdrifts both ways, so he parked in front of the house, took her back in the house, put her on the dining room table, and boop,
And
I
there you
came.
were. How many brothers and sisters do you have?
I have 6, right? Yeah, 6. 5 brothers and 1 sister.
Okay, and you're
Sister's the youngest.
and sister's youngest. So where are
I
you in
am
the pecking order?
Middle.
In the middle.
Okay.
I am the middle child,
Okay.
which is the honoriest child.
Okay. I know how that is. Yes.
So is she.
So, when we were talking the other day, your childhood was pretty rough.
My childhood was poverty. We had nothing.
And at age 8 years old,
At 8 years of age, I went into foster homes, and I went till I was 13. From 8 till I was 13, was in 6 different foster homes.
yeah, you said 6 different foster homes in 5 years.
Right. Right. And one of them I was at 3 years.
Yeah, and you said it was
crummy.
it was not very fun.
No, no. I always have gotten blamed for everything. I still get blamed for everything. No, and then I went and they decided, because I like gardening, that they would send me to a farm out in Greenfield, Massachusetts. And these folks were the Noyces, and they had about 86 acres. Plus we leased another 35 acres and another 300 acres. So we had a fairly good sized farm for Massachusetts.
Now you were talking too, though. You were the only child out of the 6 that
Correct.
was taken
That-
away from
that was
by the
right.
state.
Right. And why? Because I was such a nice boy. By the way, when I went to kindergarten, the kindergarten told my mother that after 2 weeks, we don't want this kid around. So I didn't get to go back to kindergarten. Went to 1st grade, 2nd grade, and during Christmas vacation, we was sledding, and I hit a cement post, and I tore my leg up. And so I was out from January, February, March, the beginning of April. Went back to school, and so I had to take 2nd grade over again.
You said
And
400
Mrs. Brown was my 2nd grade teacher the second time. I remember her.
You said 480 stitches.
486 stitches in my
86
leg
stitches in the leg whenever
Right.
you did that.
to pull it back together again. Yeah. And it was really a miracle, because no major arteries got
Right.
cut. And another doctor I talked to later on said the reason why was because it was a wood on the sled, and it just pushed everything out of the way when it went in.
So now you're at the Noyces. You're
Right.
working a farm,
Right.
and you were talking about you got to go also take care of a horse.
They let me buy some horses. So I had to work off,
Right.
for buying the horses, but that's what I did. First horse I had was Hydro's Gal. She was a racehorse that they retired. but you still love to run.
Well, now you were talking about you first were taking care of a horse, and you would take care of it in the pen.
Okay, that goes back to when I was at another foster home.
Oh, okay, okay.
And I was probably about 10 years old then.
All right.
And I'd go over to the riding stable and I would clean the stalls so I could ride the pony around in the ring. And he let me ride around in the ring and around and around. And then after about 2.5 months or 3 months, he said, you're a good enough rider now, I'll let you go out. So he let me take it out on a trail ride, all by myself.
Yeah.
And I got back because I'm here.
Yeah. All right, so now you're at the Noises, you're working the farm.
Right, and we had, and summertime from the month of June all the way into September was constantly working on harvesting different crops.
And you had several pairs of shoes.
Summertime I didn't have any, but I did have shoes though. I did have shoes there.
You
I
just didn't
have
wear
shoes
them.
before very often, but
Right.
Summertime from when we got out of school until we went back to school, I didn't wear shoes at all.
Even while you were bringing in crops.
Anything. So my feet were tough.
Mm-hmm.
They aren't tough anymore.
So, okay, so you grew up there. When were you reunited then with your family?
Probably when I was 15. They came to see me, and then I went to see them. But I was only there for maybe a week, and then had to get back to the Noises to do my chores. I had to get up early in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, and help milk 36 cows every single morning, 7 days a week, and every single evening, 7 days a week.
Cut.
What?
I said cut.
Okay, so you working on the farm, 15, 16. At what point, where did you
Oh, by the way,
first learn about Christ?
By the way, I did work. We were allowed to work for another farmer, and we made 75 cents an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Stacking bales of hay, 8 or 9 hours a day. It was work. And by the way, I was thin, but I was so muscular. And when I went from junior high to high school, they did these initiations back then. They still do some of them sometimes here, but they didn't dare touch me. They just looked I was all muscle, just like your boys.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I was muscle. And they decided that they weren't going to play around with me. So it was interesting. One day, this one kid they were after, and so we're in the locker room, and so he got next to me and walked out with me because he knew he was going to be safe. And they were after one of the poor other guys. All right, when I was about 17 years of age, I used to listen on radio because in the wintertime in New England, it was cold. 20 degrees 0 wasn't anything.
Yeah.
And snow, lots and lots of snow. And town was 5 miles away, so if I wanted to do some work or something, I couldn't go to town to do it. So I stayed at the house, and I listened to 2 radio broadcasts. One was Unshackled out of Pacific Garden Mission in Chicago, and the other one was Word of Life out of New York area. And Jack Wurtson was the director of Word of Life, and also had the radio program.
Curious, what attracted you to Christian programming? And there was other stations that were on.
Was, and I can't figure out why. Every time there was something on television, it didn't make any difference whether it was Oral Roberts or whether Seventh-day Adventist. It didn't make any difference. I was at the television watching it.
Well,
Interesting.
partly was because while you were at Noises, you went to church.
Yeah, we went to church every Sunday.
And he didn't get satisfactory answers from the pastor.
I went to the pastor.
Because he was seeking,
Yeah.
but he was told to teach a Sunday school class, to join the choir, to be a leader in the
Youth
youth
group.
group. But he never was told that he needed a personal relationship with Jesus Christ.
Okay, so you were seeking that out, and that's probably why then. Okay.
Correct. That's why anything religious that was around, I would listen to and
Trying to
watch.
find that answer.
Right, trying to find an answer. So one night, coming in to do 1955, Christmas time, 1955, Jack Wurtson was giving a message, and at the conclusion of it, he always gave an invitation, but the conclusion of this one, he was given an invitation, and so I knelt beside my bed and I asked God, I says, God, if there's anything to this, I really want to know. Mm-hmm. Because I listened to people on Unshackled whose lives were transformed by Jesus Christ, and I went to church, but it didn't mean anything. Nothing really was of any value, other than we just had social activities. And then in January, Word of Life made an announcement on their radio program. They were looking for someone to be in charge of their riding stables. And I had sold all my horses at that point of time, had gotten the driver's license, and I didn't have a car, but I had a driver's license. And so I wrote them and said, I'm interested in coming and being your stable manager. So the chief of staff of at Word of Life came to see me, and after I'd written to them, and then he said, we're interested. So I said, okay, I'm interested also. He said, all we pay though is $10 a week, plus all you can eat and a place to sleep. I said, okay. So I decided to go to Word of Life, and I got to Word of Life, and I was in charge of the stables on an 86-acre island. And so I took a speedboat across to the island, and as I walked up out of the docking area, there was this young guy that said to me, introduced himself, and I introduced myself, and then he said, how long have you been a Christian? 6 years. He said, praise the Lord, that's fantastic. I said to myself, what's so fantastic about it? What's so great about it? So every evening, by the way, that evening I stayed with Chris Williams, and it was the first time in my life I'd ever seen a man read his Bible, get down on his knees, and pray before he went to bed. And so I said to myself, if he does it, I'm a Christian, I'm going to do it too. So I mimicked him in relationship. I have no idea what I did, but I did it. But I think that he really knew I wasn't saved. Because every time there was a special meeting that happened, that first weekend we had Charles Fuller from Old Fashioned Revival Hour was a speaker. Dawson Trotman, who was in charge, the director of Navigators, had been there and had drowned in the lake, and they found him the day that I arrived. And then that Saturday evening, Jack held his youth rally from the island, and during the meeting, his radio broadcast, the wife of Dawson Trotman and the daughter both got up in the broadcast and made fantastic testimonies of how God had, delivered them and helped them during this period of time, and so forth. And afterwards, at the conclusion of that, Jack preached, and the conclusion of that, he gave an invitation, and I said to myself, I was sitting all the way up and back, and I said, I need to go forward. But I just told all these people all around me that I was a Christian, so I won't do it. And I didn't do it. So the next day, Charles Fuller spoke on Sunday morning on the island, and we all had to attend all these meetings also, plus also our other responsibilities. And so I went there, listened to him, and there was one other individual before that, but I listened to him and I said, I need to do it, but I've told all these people that I already am, and I'm not going to embarrass myself by doing this. So Chris took me to the inn that afternoon, and Charles Fuller was speaking again, and they had, by the way, a tent with a sawdust on the floor and everything. And I was standing in back, and I said to myself again when he gave the invitation, I need to do this, but I can't.
Keep going.
But I can't. So I went back to the island, and then that evening, two missionaries spoke, Harry Balbeck and Harold Reimer, who at that time had been missionaries amongst the Shavanti Indians of the Amazon. And what they did, they showed 60mm pictures of the Amazon, and they were working with these Indians and so forth. And I said, that's interesting. That's really neat. I'd like to do something like that. So I went up and I talked with Harry afterwards, and he was the only one that asked me. I gave him my name. He says, Bob, how long have you been saved? I said, I haven't been. So it was Robbie Robinson, who stood right there, and he took me aside, took me to John 3:16. And by the way, I don't memorize John 3:16, and he took me to it, and he made it personal. And that night, by faith, I trusted in Jesus Christ as my Savior. Went forward to counselors, and they talked to me and asked me questions, and I passed them also. But when I went outside, there was another individual who was the head of the staff on the island, and I had told him I was a Christian. I walked up and took his hand, and I said, you know what happened to me tonight? I just got saved. And I knew it without any question what had happened. And it was a fantastic summer because I spent 10 weeks at Word of Life, and we had some of the greatest speakers in America come to Word of Life, and they allowed me to do it. I would get all my work done and so forth, and then I would go to Bible study in the morning, and then I would take a ride and come back and get cleaned up and go back to another Bible study. And then in the afternoon, I would take people on rides all afternoon. In the evening, I'd get cleaned up and go to the Bible, and I did that. And I said to myself one time, and said to someone else too, I said, when I used to attend church, we'd attend church 1 day a week and 1 hour a week. And I said, I've been attending it 4 or 5 hours a day. And here 10 weeks, I won't have to attend church the rest of my life. But I still do.
So from that experience, when did you surrender to the ministry?
2 weeks after that.
Okay.
It was at a campfire at Word of Life. What we did, and they asked us to do, and by the way, the same guy was speaking. Harry Balbeck was speaking at that. And they asked us to pick up a stick, and as a symbol of you giving your life to Christ, throw it into the campfire. And so that's what I did 2 weeks after. And the interesting thing also was that about 3 weeks after I was saved, a group of young people talked about going to Fort Ticonderoga for a street meeting. And they asked me, he said, hey, Bob, how about going to Fort Ticonderoga with us for a street meeting? I said, I'm willing to do anything. So I went there, and I arrived there, and here they are. We're all standing up here, and the leader of it says, hey, we've got a guy that has just been saved for a couple weeks here, and he's going to come up and give a testimony. I had no idea what to say, what to do, but I did get through it. And then another neat thing that summer was that Billy Graham held a crusade there on the island, not on the island, but at the inn for Schroon Lake. And it was only a weekend, but one night we as a staff were willing, if we're willing to, we could go over and do counseling for his crusade. So I did. And they were I was only 19 years of age at that time, and these guys were probably 15 or 16. The two of them, they came up to me afterwards, and they said, we want to make a decision for Christ. So those are the first two people that I led to the Lord Jesus Christ. I had the opportunity of sharing the gospel with them and helping them get saved. So that was it.
So you've been pastoring now for how many years?
Oh, for a long time.
That's not an answer.
62 years.
62 years.
62 years in church ministry. Before that in youth ministry, and then pastorate. Pastorate for 52 years Right, 52 years in youth ministry for 10 years.
And everywhere from East Coast to Alaska, Texas. What's the
We have
furthest?
been up from Alaska to and I preached in Alaska, Florida, and California, and Maine, and places in between.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Going back to like talking with Mom about what are some of the things that you have seen change in our world. What are some changes that you've seen?
Everybody has cars today. Everybody has phones today. You know, even teenagers here in Sanderson have cars. As I remember back when I was in high school and graduating from high school, only one guy had a car. And so on our graduation, we all went to Springfield, Massachusetts, and Springfield has it has a theme park. And I rode, for the first time in my life, I rode a roller coaster. And I rode it 5 times in a row. I liked it so much.
We were talking.
So that's changed, and also salary has changed. Monies have changed. I remember we had nothing. It would cost us 10 cents for an ice cream cone from the tinkling guy that came by in his truck.
Ice cream man.
Yeah, the ice cream man. And it was a hard thing to get 10 cents. I remember one time at one of the foster homes I was at, that if I got all good grades and didn't have a failure somewhere, I got 10 cents for every one of those good grades. And then I remember I got an F or something, and he charged me 10 cents. And that was a heartbreak. 10 cents. That's more than you make in a week. Or you had in a week. So it was, but today, and I look at how we grew up as a kid and how little we had, and then today, all the kids have. It's like reading those letters from kids to Santa Claus, asking for phones and asking for those hoverboards and different things. We never knew. There was no such thing as a hoverboard.
Yeah.
By the way, there's no such thing as cell phones either.
No.
First computer I had was in 1980, and I paid $33,400 for it.
Not 33,000.
No.
3,300.
Right.
Yeah, $3,400 for that computer.
And it was a Tandy, wasn't it?
It was a Tandy,
Yeah.
and it was only 16 megabytes or something. There's more power on one of my thumb drives that I've got than they could even think about having.
We were also talking the changes. You were talking with your friend the other day in China, through text messaging.
I was sending a text message to a missionary friend of mine in China, and immediately he has it, and immediately he answers me back, and I said, that boggles my mind.
Yeah.
And he said, what boggles my mind? I don't understand it. I said, that I'm talking to you, and you are this far away from me, and you answer me immediately. That's impossible, but it is possible, right?
So
And the same thing with preaching. I can remember spending 20 to 30 hours for a half-hour message. And today, I may spend 15 minutes. But I spend a lot more time as I build it up and so forth.
Right.
But to get everything together, it only takes me probably about 15 minutes to get everything together.
Right. And
And then I work on it from there. But it's just unbelievable. And traveling.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just.
So as you guys think back now, today is December 26, 2018. Been married 54 years. As you think back over your life and you think looking forward, what would be one thing that you would want grandchildren, great-grandchildren to know about you?
Okay, God is the most important thing. God has supplied so much for us within our lives over the years, and the most important thing within my life is my walk with the Lord Jesus Christ, and then her, and then our ministry. And I think of all the people throughout the years that have been saved in our ministry. Some of them we still have correspondence with through Facebook, and we didn't have that back then. We didn't have much of anything back then. But and I think of these people, and one day, and I think of the missions we've supported, that we have supported, and we still support today, because we give money to our church, but plus also we give money directly to missionaries that we have, and the people that have received the Lord Jesus Christ through them. I believe that that's the most important thing that I can think of in my life. Number one, God. Number two, her. Number three, our ministry, and the opportunities and the privileges we've had of allowing our God working in and through our lives as we have been surrendered to Him.
Yes.
Yes.
I think we can do with a lot less than what we think we need to have material-wise. Yeah. And I think many times that we've done with less, we've depended on the Lord, and more. That gives Him priority in our lives to do what He wants to do.
Yeah. A first pastorate I took was in Kenai, Alaska. And I was working at Friendly Ford as a service writer. She was working at the the Little Providence Hospital, which is now Big Providence Hospital. And we, the Pastor Lindquist of Chapel by the Sea, where we were attending, came to me and said, you know, there's a church in Kenai that's looking for a pastor, and I think you'd make a good pastor. I was helping him with youth, and we were also doing other youth activities and so forth. And I said, I don't know. He said, you need to think about it and pray about it. So next Sunday, he asked me again. He says, what have you thought and how have you been praying about that? I said, I've been thinking about it and praying about it, but I'm not really sure. He said, you need to do it. He said, you need to, I said, I will give them a call and set up a time. This is just before Christmas. So 2 weeks before Christmas, we were set up and we went to Kenai. And by the way, then the Kenai Road was and we arrived at the church in Kenai, and they put us up, and I spoke that Sunday, and they said, well, we'll call you next week and let you know what we think. So they called me, and they said, we'd like to have you come as our pastor. Well, I was making a fairly good salary even for that period of time at Friendly Ford, and she was making a very good salary. And so and the church said that they would pay us the biggest amount of $276 a month, plus provide housing for us, utilities and so forth. So we said, okay, we'll do it.
Yeah, it was a lesson for me on tithing, because I took all the bills and I took our income, and our income was here, and the bills were here, and he said, you make the tithe first.
So you give the check to the church, Chapel by the Sea first, and then we'll take care of the rest of it.
And somehow, it all worked out. And I can't tell you to this day how God worked it out, other than we got checks from somebody in Pennsylvania.
When we went to the church in Kenai, right, we had one of the couples in the church had family in Pennsylvania, and that church sent us a check every month. And then someone else also. So we got 3 or 4 checks a month from people we'd never known, because of people within the church there. And the church grew. It was really a tremendous ministry. We went about somewhere in the 30s, and a year later we're running about 120, 125, and we really had a good youth group. And this young lady over here was born during that period of time too, and God just blessed, and we saw people saved. One thing that really impressed me was that this one day I was sitting in my study, and the study was the pulpit was here, and my study was behind the pulpit, behind some walls. And I all of a sudden heard someone out in the auditorium. We never locked doors, so people could come in and out. I heard this person out in the auditorium, but this person, it was a lady, and she was crying. So I got up and I walked out and I started talking with her, and she said, "I don't know if I'd ever go to heaven. I'm not sure what is going to happen to me." And so I led her to the Lord right there. And then she said, "You need to come home and talk to my husband." So I got ready, and we went ready and went over to the house, and I led her husband to the Lord, and they were faithful to the church, faithful. And the neat thing was, I don't go by Reverend at all. I go by Pastor. But she used to call me Reverend Bob, but she did it very respectfully. And I accepted it from her because, who she was and so forth. We heard from them for years. And the last thing we heard from them, they were down in the Mediterranean on an island, and he was still working as a welder, but he died there on that island. But one thing I know, one day I'll see him again. But we just had a good ministry. And the other neat thing that happened in the church, we had some these businessmen that came by one day, and they said, "We're interested in purchasing this property because the Kenai River was right there, right off of it. Right. And we want to do a boat dock and fishing and so forth, but we need property up here so people can park and house them and so forth and take them down." And I said, "Well, you need to make an offer to the church of what you would do." So they made an offer to the church that they would give the church $80,000, plus they would give the church 5 acres on the Kenai Spur Road, and help us build a building. So I went to the deacons, and we're running then. We were packed in our building. We were running 3 children's churches at the same time, and so no children were in the auditorium. It was all adults and older teenagers in the auditorium. And so I went to them and talked to them about it, and they said, "No, we won't do it, because you're going to leave one of these days, and you're going to leave that building and everything to us to fill up." And I said, "Oh, come on, guys. I probably would have stayed for a long time if they built that building." So we stayed another 2 years and fought with the situation. And then we had so many people attending, they couldn't, if they were, service started at 11 o'clock, if they got there at 20 minutes of, there was no parking space. There was nothing there, absolutely nothing. And so they'd go somewhere else. So that's when First Baptist Church, Southern Baptist, started a church there. And not only they did, but also Lutherans and also Presbyterians, and also another Bible church started a church there. And then also they started the church in Soldotna.
College Heights.
Right. And I said, well, there's where all the people are going. And the church was off the road, and it still is off the road. And they're still meeting, by the way, in the same building.
Yeah.
And
Where
the
we
reason,
were at a year and a half ago, 2 years ago.
because they did not take that step of faith to do something. Right. And it's really too bad. But
Well, cool. That's what we need, and I think my phone's about dead. So
your phone is about dead.
I think the phone is about out of battery here.
Oh,
So we're gonna click off.
click.